Okay, Hazak Baruch and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday morning as we are entering a new week, a new parasha. But of course, today, I'm sure we all heard the unfortunate, tragic news of the passing of one of the greatest giants that our times have ever seen. One of the biggest rabbis, Gadol Ador, in the truest sense. We lost on Friday Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Alav Shalom, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who many of us have met even though we didn't live in Israel. Rav Chaim lived in Bnei Brak, and anybody that went to visit Israel, somewhere on their list, as they're going around to the different places, you had always to make sure you stopped by the famous house of Rav Chaim Kanievsky to get a beracha. Rav Chaim was known for his brachot. People from all over the world stormed his apartment, even if you could even call it an apartment. I've been there many times, and I've seen it's a tiny room for a dining room, and it's a tiny room for a bedroom, and that's all it is. But he didn't need the money. He didn't need the size of his house. Rav Chaim Kanievsky lived for the Torah. This person who spent his entire life studying Torah. You know, we have this week the parasha that we're going to read, Parashat Shemini, is going to be accompanied as well. Besides the regular weekly reading, we're also going to read Parashat Para. Okay? Parashat Para is the parasha in Parashat Chukat, a small paragraph which tells people how to become pure when they become impure. They have to take the ashes of a para aduma, the ashes of a red heifer, and they sprinkle it on the person. This is what we're going to read. Besides the weekly portion of the reading on Shabbat, we're going to read a small paragraph for the last aliyah of Parashat Para, right? So this is taken from the Parashat Chukat. Para means a cow, okay? And we're going to read a small paragraph of how to purify people. Why are we reading this now, by the way? Why are we reading now in the middle of Vayikra, an extra piece all the way from the book of Bamidbar? The answer is, of course, because we have coming right around the corner, Hag Pesach. And in order to eat the Korban Pesach, one of the laws is that everybody must be pure. We have to be tahor. And eating a Korban Pesach when we're impure is forbidden. And because Korban Pesach is so important, everybody must partake of it, and everybody has to eat of it. And actually, the violation, the sin of not eating it, it's one of the only two positive commandments that if one doesn't do it, they receive karet. That's very, very rare. Usually a person gets karet if they violate a lo ta'aseh, if they violate a don't do. If a person commits something that's not allowed in a negative way. As an example, if a person sleeps with someone that is forbidden to them, right? If a person eats chametz on Pesach, certain avirot Shabbat, so a person does something that's forbidden, they inherit karet. Rarely, if a person fails to do a good deed, do we give them karet. If a person doesn't hear shofar, he gets a sin, it's not karet. The only two exceptions is Korban Pesach and Brit Milah. If a person fails to do any one of those two, then they get karet. And therefore, we want to make sure to announce to everybody, listen, Pesach's coming up, make sure you are tahor. Or if you're tameh, you do what you need to become tahor. So we read in the synagogue out loud, Parashat Para, as an announcement to announce to everybody the rules of becoming tahor, to make sure that they get prepared, because I know we're catching our breath. Purim just finished. Some of us, our voice is still gone from Purim, but there's no time to blink, there's no time to stop. We have to get straight to work. Pesach is just a few weeks away. So we read the paragraph of Para Aduma, reminding everybody to become pure. Get ready for the holiday of Pesach. Make sure that on the 14th of Nisan, you are ready to eat your Korban Pesach in a pure state. Okay, well, right after this, in Parashat Para, Parashat Chukat, the Pasuk tells us, Vayavohu b'nei Israel, the Jewish people all arrived at Midbar Sin, at a place, B'chodesh Harishon, in the month of Nisan, that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And the pasuk says, unfortunately, Vatamot Sham Miriam Vatikaber Sham. And Miriam dies there. And Rashi comes along and Rashi asks, Lama nismecha perashat mitat Miriam leparashat paraduma. Why is the section narrating the death of Miriam placed immediately after the section of the red cow? Why is Miriam's death put right next to the paragraph of the parah that we just spoke about, that we're going to read this week? Lomar lecha, to tell you, the Torah over here this is called a juxtaposition. The Torah is somech, it's putting two things next to each other, even though we know in the Torah, not everything is written in chronological order. The Torah is not a storybook. Things don't have to make sense. Things don't have to be written back to back in chronology, the way the order and time that it happened. So why is the Torah writing right here? Miriam dies, and it puts it right away next to the paragraph of Para Aduma. Answers Rashi, quoting the Gemara in Moed Katan, Lomar lecha, to teach you, Ma korbanot mechaperin. The same way these sacrifices atone. What is the purpose of a sacrifice? Why do we bring a sacrifice? It's to effect atonement, to bring kapara. If a person sins, they bring a sacrifice. The same way they bring a sacrifice to atone. Af mitat tzadikim mechaperet. When a tzadik dies, their death is an atonement. A tzadik who dies doesn't die only for him and for his family. A tzaddik's death is a kapara, an atonement for the entire Am Yisrael. And this, of course, goes without saying, a tzaddik on the caliber, a tzaddik on the level of Rav Chaim Kanievsky, a person who we will very unlikely find again in our lifetime, somebody on such a level, somebody who studied so much Torah, who knew so much Torah, who spent their life dedicated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Torah. This death, Rabotai, whether you knew Rav Chaim, whether you didn't know Rav Chaim, whether you met Rav Chaim, whether you don't even know he exists, his life, his Torah protected every single one of us, and his loss is a tragedy that's with unimaginable proportions. And his loss is going to be felt, unfortunately, by every single one of us. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sometimes the sins of the Jewish people, like a cup, the sins of getting slowly higher and higher, and when the cup is full, HaKadosh Baruch Hu must do something. And sometimes, instead of taking away many people, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes away one tzaddik as a atonement. This is what happened on Friday. We lost a tzaddik, we lost a gadol hador, somebody who was a protection. I remember when Acham Ovadia passed away a few years ago, the leader of Hezbollah said, this is the perfect time to attack. The spiritual iron dome of the Jewish people is down. This is what not a rabbi said, not a tzaddik, not a Jew. This is what the leader of the Muslims said. This is the time to attack. Their iron dome is down. So even they know it. Matter of fact, when Moshe Rabbeinu sends the spies, the Meraglim, to Eretz Yisrael to go find out how to go in, from where to attack, etc., Moshe Rabbeinu says something very interesting. He says, Uritem, I want you to look if what? Pasuk says, to take a look if they're fortified, is there a wall? And then, Hayesh ba'etz. Also, I want you to find out, are there any trees? Are there any trees? What do you mean, are there any trees? What does Moshe care if there are trees? What, are you celebrating Tu B'Shvat? Are there trees over there? He wants to go plant a tree now? Go take a look at the agriculture, the landscaping. What is Moshe Rabbeinu asking the spies? Go take a look if there's a tree. Who cares about the trees? Says Rashi, Hayesh ba'etz, im yesh ba adam kasher sheyagin alehem bizchuto. Do they have a kosher person that will protect the people in his merits? Moshe Rabbeinu wants to know, are there any righteous non-Jews alive? Are there any righteous Canaanim alive that will be able to protect them? From who? From us. Even Moshe was worried. Even Moshe knew, as great as we are, and we're the Jews, we're Am Yisrael, we have Moshe, Yehoshua, we have all the legends, and still they may have a tzaddik that could provide shade and protection. They may have a tree provides shade. A person goes under the tree to be protected. Moshe Rabbeinu says to the spies, go and find out, are there any trees? Are there any tzaddikim? Of course, the spies come back, and we know how the story plays out, and they say they're too big, they're going to kill us. But then steps up Yehoshua and Caleb, and they say the famous line. Says the pasuk, this is going to be in chapter 14. Vayomeru, and they say, it's a great land. Please don't rebel against God. And then look at the line, pasuk 9. Sar tzilam me'alehem. Their shade is gone. What does that mean? Their shade is gone. And Rashi says, Sar tzilam me'alehem. Moshe, you wanted to know, do they have a tzaddik protecting them? Well, they did. But their shade is gone. Iyov. Shehaya magin alehem. They had one good guy. His name was Iyov. Maginam ve'hizkam. He was their shield. He was their protector. Ksherim shebahem metu. The good ones amongst them passed away. Their shade is gone. Now is the time to attack. This is what Yehoshua and Caleb tell the Jewish people. So even a person like Iyov, who was living amongst non-Jews, was able to protect them. Kal vahomer ben beno shel kal vahomer, a tzaddik of the caliber of Rav Chaim Kanievsky, zecher tzaddik v'kadosh l'bracha. When a tzaddik dies, it's something that we all have to feel the pain. Ma korbanot mechaprin, just like a korban atones. Mitat tzaddikim mechaperet, the death atones. But Rabotai, it's not magic. It's not just Rav Chaim died and now we're all good. Rav Chaim's death is only an atonement if we feel the pain and we realize that the life of the tzaddik is something worth emulating. When we look at such a life and we realize, wow, that is what's important, and we're able to readjust our values, and we mourn. Why are we mourning? We don't mourn somebody if we don't value their life. If a wicked person dies, we don't mourn because there's nothing to mourn. Baruch Hashem, he died. He's a horrible guy. If somebody that's an average person that spent their life doing nonsense, if they die, okay, they died. It's sorry. If you know the family, you feel bad for the family, but you don't mourn the person's death. There's nothing to mourn. Their life wasn't of any value. There was no substance. You only mourn, right? As an example, if you're a heavy NBA fan and an NBA player dies, so you're crying because this person was an NBA legend and his death it means something to you because now this person who brought so much to the NBA community is now dead. So you value basketball and therefore you value this person's death. If you don't care about basketball, okay, he died. He's another guy. Every day people die, right? We're not mourning every single day. If you don't value sports and an athlete died, okay, there's nothing to cry. If this person was a person of good midot, if they changed the world, if they were able to use something that they had to bring a smile to people's faces, to be able to maybe use their basketball skills to help teens that are going through depression, then that's already a different story. But I'm saying if you don't care about basketball and an NBA player dies, okay, he dies. What does that have to do in my life? Rav Chaim and people like Rav Chaim, when they die, if you don't value Torah, then okay, he died. Big deal. Okay, another Jew died. When we sit and we cry, and we're all the way here in America, but we appreciate what it means that he died, and we're able to shed a tear, and we're able to understand that no, it's not just another person. This is a person that spent their life, and it's a life worth emulating. It's a person who spent their life studying Torah. That realization that each one of us gains, that is a kapara. Now the result is we say, okay, now I have to step up. That's the atonement. We get closer to Hashem. That's the point. It's not just magic. Rav Chaim dies, we're good. Now the cup is empty, and we could go back to our merry ways, and we could sin again until the next tzaddik dies. No, the point is that we have to learn from the life of a tzaddik. We have to see what is it that they did. Do we appreciate, do we value how they spent their time? And that is the kapara. So, just to speak for a couple of moments, about Rav Chaim Kanievsky. There were eulogies today, this morning in Israel. The burial is taking place as we speak, as they're putting the final pieces of dirt. But there was eulogies this morning said by great Gedolim. They were even translated over here in America on different social media platforms. But I would like to share with you just some thoughts of my own. Nothing that I heard really, but just actually personal experiences that I had with Rav Chaim Kanievsky. I was zocheh to meet Rav Chaim 3 times in my life, and I'd like to share them with you if it's okay. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, I'll tell you, the second time I met him, I was married, living in Israel, and my wife, Frida, was pregnant. And I remember it was very difficult for us living in Israel. I mean, she had a very hard time. I was in paradise. I was in heaven. Not because she was having a bad time. I was in paradise because I was learning Torah. I was steiging away. I was in Gan Eden, learning all day. Halachot Shabbat. Really, in Kolel it's the best thing. It's not for me. It wasn't a means to an end. I didn't do it to get the degree that I need to become one day a rabbi. It was for me beautiful, but it was very difficult for my wife, and therefore it was very difficult for me. So I remember we were debating: should we come back to America? Should we not come back to America? So one Shabbat, Erev, right before Pesach, right before Ben Azmanim, in Kolel, in Yeshiva, it's customary that you study from Tishrei till Nisan, and then you come home for the whole month of Pesach. You take a break. That's your summer vacation, and then you go back and you study more, and then you have another 3 weeks break, Tisha B'Av till Elul. So I remember right before we were coming back to America, we spent a Shabbat by my uncle who lives in Bnei Brak, down the block from Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Matter of fact, Rav Chaim's father was the Rav Steipler Gaon, also one of the Gdolei Hador, very rare. My father-in-law pointed out that you have a father and son back to back who are both giants in Am Yisrael. Torah giants back to back is very rare. You can have a big father and then a son who's big, but no one as big, right? To have the Steipler and Rav Chaim back to back is something that is very rare to find. The Steipler was somebody who my uncle, who lives in Bnei Brak right now, my uncle's a Rosh Kolel, and he met the Steipler. The Steipler was a sandak for my first cousin, so he was the one holding him on the Brit Milah. So anyways, when I went to spend the Shabbat by my uncle in Bnei Brak, I remember we went to pray Mincha, and I decided, you know what, let me go get etzah, let me get advice from Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Okay? So I remember waiting online, my uncle took me in, he had connections. We went into the office, and I explained, I said, I'm here with my wife, and I'm learning Torah, but it's very hard, and we want to go back. And I made sure to emphasize, when we go back, we're gonna learn Torah. I said, we were thinking of going back to America. So he looked up at me, he says, why do you want to leave Israel? I said, Rabbi, I'm sorry, I promise I'm gonna learn. It's gonna be easier just if we're over there. We have the family. What do you think? And he said, and I'll never forget, because Rav Chaim was known to be a very careful about his words. Okay? He would not speak a lot. Even if you came to get a beracha from him, he rarely gave more than the 2 words, bracha ve'hatzlacha. He knew how important time was. Matter of fact, even later on in his life, he realized bracha ve'hatzlacha, even those 2 words, which means blessings and success, even those 2 words were too time consuming, and he became even more careful on his words. And he said, instead of bracha ve'hatzlacha, he became even more frugal, and he would say, bua. What's bua? It's an acronym for bracha ve'hatzlacha. So he gave people the bua. So I remember going in, I thought he's going to give me a bua, he's going to give me bracha ve'hatzlacha. So he looked up and he said more than 2 words. He said, why do you want to go back? I said, oh my gosh, he's actually talking to me. So I started getting so nervous. I said, Rabbi, of course we're going to keep learning. It's just easy. And then he looks up and he said, I heard this not from secondhand. Rabotai, I heard these words from his mouth. Rav Chaim looked at me and said, Benko ubenko, you can do whatever you want, but either way, Mashiach's coming soon. You're going to be back here in Israel. These are the words that I heard from Rav Chaim's mouth himself. Either way, you're going to be back in Israel. Mashiach's coming very soon. So I went back home and I said, all right, Frida, we're staying for another year. And we did. We stayed for another year. This time, we realized that this was actually our last year. And we're going to go back. So we stayed one more Shabbat by my uncle in Bnei Brak. And when we went to pray Mincha this time, I didn't ask Rav Chaim for advice, because if you ask him, you have to do what he says, by the way. You can't ask and then not listen. That's like going against Gadol Ador. You got to be out of your mind. So this time, I went in and I said, Rabbi, just letting you know we're going back to America. But I just here for a bracha, you know? So he looked up and he says, why are you going back? Like, oh no, please, Rabbi, don't do this to me. I'm not asking, I'm letting you know we're going. Just want a bracha. He said, why are you going back? I said, it's very hard for my wife. She doesn't really know so much people. So Rav Chaim looks up and he smiles and he says, let her move to Bnei Brak. She'll make a lot of friends here. So I said, could I have a bracha either way, Rabbi? So he gave me a bracha, and that was the last time that I really met Rav Chaim Kanievsky. But I want to share with you, actually, the first time I met Rav Chaim Kanievsky was when I was still a bachelor studying in yeshiva in Israel, and my parents came to spend the holiday of Pesach in Israel with me and my brother. And I'll never forget, Rav Chaim was known to finish, you ready for this? Not Shas every 7 years, not Shas every year. Rav Chaim would finish Kol HaTorah Kula every year. What that means is that we finish Shas, the whole Talmud, Bavli. It takes us 7 years to finish it. We do a daf a day. Rav Chaim would finish all of that, plus all of Chumash, plus all of Navi, plus all of the prophets, the writings, the Ketubim, with all the commentaries, plus all the Yerushalmi, plus all of the Halacha, Shulchan Aruch, Rambam, Nosei Kelim, all of that, he would finish it, not every 7 years, every year. This was the diligence. This was the Hatmada, not wasting a second. Every single year, he would finish Kol HaTorah Kula. And when would he finish, by the way? He would finish Erev Pesach on the 14th of Nisan, and then he would make a huge siyum, and everyone that wanted to partake in it. Why would he make a siyum Erev Pesach? Because we know that we have the fast of Bechorot on Erev Pesach. We have the fast for the firstborns on the day before Pesach. So he would make a siyum, and that siyum would allow people to eat on that specific fast. So he would make a siyum, and my father, who is a Bechor, wanted to go to the siyum. What better siyum to go to than the one on the whole Torah? So we went together, my father and myself. We stayed at my uncle's house. We woke up early. We walked to Rav Chaim's apartment, or in the synagogue rather. We prayed. I prayed with Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and right after the prayer, I sat 5 feet from him. And right after the prayers, he pulled out a wine and a book, and he did a masechet. He did a siyum on masechet, the last masechet of Shas. He did the Hadran Alan, and that was the last time that I saw Rav Chaim Kanievsky. The first time that I saw Rav Chaim Kanievsky. And what's amazing, and something that dawned upon me yesterday, that gave me goosebumps. He would finish Shas every year. The whole Torah every year. What that means is that every 3 years, when we have an extra month, he would have an extra month. What would he do with that extra month? That's extra time. He didn't watch Netflix. What do you think he did with that extra month? So every leap year, every time there was an extra Adar, where he already finished it, what am I going to do now? He would spend the extra month writing a book. That was his yearly schedule. He would finish every year the whole Torah, but on the extra years that there was an extra month, he would write a book. And it dawned upon me that this year, Rabotai, is a leap year. And what that means is that Rav Chaim Kanievsky finished Kol HaTorah Kula now, the 14th of Adar Bet, because we have an extra month, and he died the very next day. How unbelievable is that? He finished the whole Torah and was able to pass away the next day. So this is really a true loss for Am Yisrael. It's something that each and every one of us must realize. He had his priorities. He knew what was worth, what time was worth, and he knew what it was worth spending his time on. Remember, there was a story about a couple from Bnei Brak that went to visit him, and this couple, they started off their life learning, and then eventually the husband left Kolel and he started to learn. He started to work, and Baruch Hashem, the Parnassah was picking up, and he eventually was able to afford more things, nicer things. So instead of driving a used jalopy, he was able to now purchase a nicer car. And him and his wife were debating buying a BMW, I believe it was. A BMW in Bnei Brak is wow, right? It's very, very expensive, right? So he was thinking of buying a BMW, but him and his wife were going back and forth, and they had the following argument. The wife said, I don't want to get the BMW. It's going to cause ayin hara. People are going to look at us and be jealous. And I don't want to cause and stir jealousy in other people. The husband said, yeah, but we don't have to worry about the jealousy. It's not our problem. If they want to be jealous, does it mean that I don't have to have a nice car now because people are going to be jealous? I have to change my life for other people. So they had this argument back and forth. What are they going to do? How are they going to resolve this argument? Or better way, they went to the Gadol Hador. They went to Rav Chaim Kanievsky. And they sat down in front of his office, and each one is presenting their case. The wife says her piece, the husband says his piece. And finally, Rav Chaim turned to the man and he said, let me ask you, before I help you with your question, you said you left learning. He says, yes. He says, okay, but how often do you still finish Shas? Do you still learn every day for a few hours? So I'll be honest, I don't learn every day like I used to. I left learning, so my learning went down. So Rav Chaim looked at him, he says, okay, but I'm sure you learn every day for at least 4 hours. So the guy smirks, he says, be honest, Rabbi, 4 hours is a bit difficult to commit to. No, I don't learn for 4 hours every day. He says, okay, but for sure, I mean, you learn every day for 1 hour. You kovei ha'itim every single day, you learn an hour a day. Whatever it is, you can't do 4, but I'm sure you're doing every day at least an hour of dedicating time to learn. He says, listen, I try, but, work is very time consuming, and no, I don't do every day, not even an hour, honestly. I go to shul on Shabbat, I hear a class, but an hour a day, no, definitely not. And Chaim Kanievsky closes his eyes, and he says, well, if that's the case, I think you guys should go with the BMW. And the couple was shocked. They said, well, I mean, yeah, you sure? I mean, what about the ayin hara? Just a minute ago, you were not sure. What changed? I mean, what about the fact that people are going to be jealous? And Rav Chaim Kanievsky looked at the guy with the most puzzled look on his face. And he said, why would anyone be jealous of you? You don't learn. There's nothing to be jealous of. Don't worry, get the BMW. But Rav Chaim wasn't saying it to insult the guy. This is how Rav Chaim thought. What's a car? That's to be jealous of? That's what's worth emulating? That's what there is to cry over? What's that worth? It's nothing. You learn Torah. That's something to be jealous of. Matter of fact, one time, the story is said that a very wealthy man came, and the children, the people around Rav Chaim, brought this wealthy man, hoping to make an impression on this rich man. Maybe he would help the rabbi and the causes that the rabbi believed in. And Rav Chaim sat with the man, and he, instead of buttering him up like most people would do, Rav Chaim asked the rich man, do you learn Torah? As if for yourself, what do you learn? And the rich man says, do I learn? I don't know how to learn. So Rav Chaim wasn't impressed. He gave the guy bracha, and the guy left. And the children were so annoyed at their father. That's how you speak to a rich man like that? don't want to make an impression. The goal is to make him feel good, to get him to like you. But of course, a couple of days later, this man came back to Rav Chaim. He says, Rabbi, I want you to know that I have so much respect to how you spoke to me the other day. Everyone around me kisses the feet, they worship the ground that I walk on because I'm rich and I have money. But you said the truth. You said it how it is. So Rav Chaim knew what was worth spending time on. He knew what was worth valuing. He knew his priorities. Every year, Rabotai, Kol HaTorah Kula. He wasn't a prodigy, by the way. He wasn't a prodigy. When he was a young kid, his father actually got the principal called him in. He said, your son, Chaim, he's not learning good. The teachers all the kids are understanding, he's not learning well. And the father said to the Rabbi, just focus on Gemara and Rashi. Don't give him the deep stuff. Don't give him the Rishonim and Tosfot and all the others. Just stick to the basics, Gemara, Rashi. That's all I want you to teach my son. And the rabbi looked at the stipler, at the father. He says, just Gemara, Rashi. What will ever become of him? What will ever become of your son if all he learns is Gemara, Rashi? What will ever become of him? So we know what became of him. We know what became of him. He's the Gadol Hador, one of the greatest giants that we will ever see, that our generation will ever see, but it didn't come easy. Rabbi Friedman actually told me that he saw Rav Chaim once in his life. And he asked Rav Chaim, as a bachelor, he asked Rav Chaim, what does one do to be matliach in learning? How does one succeed in learning, Rabbi? And he thought Rav Chaim was going to say, you have to do chazara, and you have to do repeat and repetition and review, and you have to do this and that. And Rav Chaim looked at him and he gave him a one-word answer. You want a matzliach in learning? Pray. Pray. You want something in life? Pray. Whatever you want. Money? Pray. Learning? Pray. You need Hashem for everything. For any accomplishment, for every accomplishment, we need HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, we mourn today. We mourn a very big loss for us, for Am Yisrael. Again, whether you knew him, whether you didn't know him, whether you get a bracha from him, whether you didn't get a bracha from him, his life was a life of blessing. His Torah was a protection, it was a shade, and his death is a atonement for the entire generation. We should be zocher, all of us, to really emulate this life. Maybe we can't finish Shas every year, but there's something that we can do. Maybe we could commit and decide to maybe make a little bit better use of our time, to take at least a project upon ourselves, a little bit more learning, a little bit more focused on our Torah studies. If it's once a week, if it's once a day, whatever level we're on, to try to commit to something a little bit more, a little bit stronger, a little bit more maybe active. You know, this class is beautiful, but it's very passive learning. We're all listening. Maybe to try to make our learning something a little bit more intense, to try to step up and to fill this void that exists right now in Am Yisrael. We all must step up. The tree, the shade, the protection, the iron dome is gone. We mourn today the loss of Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh U'Bracha Rav Chaim Kanievsky. We should be zocher that he should be a militz yosher, he should be a protection, he should speak good on behalf of us. We should be zocher to have the yeshuot that he was able to bring in his lifetime continue for us, for our families, and for all of Am Yisrael. Amen. We'll stop over here, everybody. We'll see you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.